The wind howls across the misty hills of ancient Britain. Imagine a time long before castles dotted the landscape, before Christianity took root, before kings wore crowns of gold. In this era, there were tribes, wild, proud, and fiercely free. And among them, a woman rose to power, a woman whose name would be whispered in anger for centuries to come. Her name was Cartimandua, the queen of the Brigantes. To the Romans, she was a trusted ally. To her own people, she was a traitor. And to history, she became known as the Celtic Betrayer of Kings. It was the 1st century after the birth of Christ. The might of Rome had crashed upon Britain's shores, its iron legions crushing tribe after tribe. But one vast region in the north, the lands of the Brigantes, stood as a volatile border between the Roman Empire and the wild, untamed lands beyond. This was Cartimandua's domain. She was not a warrior queen in the mold of Boudica. Her weapons were intelligence, diplomacy, and a ruthless ambition. Unlike so many other tribal rulers who fought and died, Cartimandua saw a brutal truth that others refused to accept. Rome could not be stopped. So, she made a fateful decision. If she could not defeat the empire, she would rule beside it. Through shrewd alliances and strategic maneuvers, Cartimandua secured wealth and a fragile peace for her people. She became one of Rome's most favored client queens, a symbol of cooperation in a conquered land. The Romans saw her as a useful tool, a buffer against the unconquered tribes of Caledonia. But power that is bought with peace, especially in a time of war, rarely lasts for long. The very stability she created was built on a foundation of compromise that many of her people viewed as collaboration. Then, one day, a figure of legend arrived at her gates. It was Caradocus, a warrior king and the last great symbol of British resistance. For nearly a decade, he had led a guerrilla war against the invaders, his name a rallying cry for freedom. His battles had become the stuff of myth, but now his luck had run out. He had been defeated, hunted, and chased across the island. He came to Cartimandua, a fellow Briton, seeking refuge and a chance to fight another day. She welcomed him into her court, offering him safety. Or so he believed. Within days, the truth was revealed in the most brutal way. Cartimandua had him bound in heavy chains and delivered him directly to the Romans. The man who had fought for Britain's freedom was paraded through the streets of Rome, a trophy of war, humiliated before the Emperor Claudius. And what was Cartimandua's reward for this ultimate act of betrayal? She was showered in gold, given Roman citizenship, and guaranteed the protection of Rome's legions. In the eyes of the Roman Senate, she was a pragmatic and valuable ally. But to her own people and to the other British tribes, she was no longer a queen. She was the woman who had sold their hero, the betrayer of Britain. Her newfound power, however, was far from secure. It was poisoned from within her own household. Her husband, Venutius, was a traditional Celtic warrior who despised Rome and despised his wife's alliance with the conquerors. As her reliance on Rome grew, her contempt for his resistance festered. In a move that was utterly shocking for a Celtic queen of that era, Cartimandua divorced Venutius. And to add the deepest insult to this injury, she took his personal armor-bearer, a man named Velicatus, as her new lover and consort. For Venutius and his followers, this was too much to bear. It was a personal and political humiliation. He declared rebellion, raising armies against her and igniting a civil war. The island nation of the Brigantes split in two: husband versus wife, king versus queen, pro-Roman versus anti-Roman. For years, Cartimandua fought desperately to keep her throne, her palace, and her power, relying more and more on her Roman allies. When her own forces faltered, Roman legions marched north to save her, propping up her failing regime. They didn't do it out of love or loyalty, but out of cold, hard necessity. The Romans could not afford to lose their puppet queen and the control she gave them over the northern frontier. But even Rome's patience has its limits. The chaos she had unleashed became a constant drain on their resources. Revolts and uprisings flared up on every side of her kingdom. Her own people despised her, seeing her as a Roman pawn who had brought nothing but war. Her soldiers, once loyal to their queen, began to turn against her. The very foundation of her power crumbled. Eventually, Cartimandua was forced to flee her own kingdom, abandoning her throne and her people. She simply disappears into the mists of history, a queen without a country, abandoned by the very empire she had so loyally served. Her ultimate fate remains a mystery. Some Roman sources suggest she lived out the rest of her life under a form of Roman protection, a gilded cage far from the power she craved. Others whisper a darker tale, that she was executed in secret, silenced by the very hands she once fed, her usefulness having finally expired. All that remains is her legend, the story of a woman who traded freedom for power, loyalty for safety, and in the end, tragically lost them both. The story of Cartimandua is not a simple one. Was she truly a traitor, a woman who sold her honor for a crown? Or was she a pragmatist, a survivor in a brutal world ruled by swords and empires? She saw that Rome's tide was unstoppable and made the choice that others feared to make, saving her people from a war they could not win. She chose to rule at a time when men expected her to obey. And though history has branded her the betrayer, perhaps she was simply a queen who refused to die powerless in a man's world. Her legacy is a complex tapestry of ambition, survival, and betrayal. She sold her honor to save her throne, but in the end, even the might of Rome could not protect her name. If Cartimandua's story made you question the true cost of power, then subscribe to our channel. Together, we'll uncover more forgotten tales of the queens who ruled with fire, fear, and fate itself. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter of history.